Now that my 5 pieces are built, the next step in the process is to make an assembly of each of these parts so that it makes one larger cube. To do that, we're going to start a new assembly file. So I'm clicking on New, and then standard.iam for assembly, and hit Create. Before we actually start making the assembly, I wanted to mention the concept of degrees of freedom. I have a diagram here we can look at. Every part that we place within our graphics window display has 6 degrees of freedom, meaning that that piece can move along the X, Y, or Z axis, and they can also rotate about the X, Y, or Z axis. And so as we are putting this together and we constrain these pieces, we are trying to basically remove these degrees of freedom so that these pieces will no longer move. Before we do that though, there's one setting that I need to make sure that you check whether you're on the ThinkPad or on your desktop computer. So I'm going to go to Tools, go to Application Options, and on the Assembly tab, I need to make sure that I turn on the Place and Ground First component at origin. The reason we do that is when I bring my first piece in, I want it to snap to the origin and not to move from that point, and that's going to be the reference for constraining all other pieces. So once that's done, I can hit Apply and hit Close. I'm going to go to my Assembly tab and click Place as my starting point. I need to pick which piece is going to be my my base part or base piece. In my case, I'm going to use the blue one and hit Open. It automatically places a copy at the origin, and it allows me to place more copies if I want to, but I don't need any more. There's only one blue piece in my design, so I'm going to right click and hit OK. Notice that this piece, when I hover over it, there's a little pin that shows up. There's also a little pin on my browser that shows that this piece is grounded and will not move. The orientation of this piece, however, is not the way that I designed it originally. So my 4.1b graphic design template looks a little bit different. In fact, this piece sits more like in this orientation. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to switch my home view so that this is how the home is going to look. To do that, I'm going to right click on the house, set current view as home, and fit to view. That way I can use my template as a reference as I'm putting it together, and I think you'll find that helpful as well. If I rotate this now in any direction, or orbit this, if I hit the home view, it now should go back to my new home view for that part. Next step then is to click Place and select the second part. I'm going to bring the red piece in. I'm going to place it on the screen, and again, I only need one copy, so I can right click and hit OK. Now this piece actually would have to rotate 180 degrees to fit to where it does to this other blue piece, and I'm going to go ahead and free rotate that to get it close to the orientation of the way it's going to be finally assembled. So I'm using free rotate rather than free orbit, so I can just spin this one piece around. So this is close enough. I know that this is going to fit here. So I'm going to use then the constrain function to constrain these together. Now, we talked about removing 6 degrees of freedom. To do that, we're going to have to add 3 constraints. And all of these constraints are going to be the first type, which is a mate. Mate has 2 solutions. I can mate where 2 faces touch. I can mate so that edges are flush with each other. For this first one I'm going to add, I'm going to have it so that the faces are actually touching each other. So I'm going to select this surface here. If I hold down F4, that is the hotkey to be able to free orbit. Let go of F4, and then I'm going to select this surface here so that these surfaces are actually touching each other. Once I do that, I hit Apply. I'm going to check to see what that did to my assembly. So I added one mate between those surfaces, but it looks like this red one keeps moving, and that's true because we haven't removed all degrees of freedom. But if I turn it to the left, I can see that they are now staying online with that plane there. So 1 degree of freedom has been removed from this assembly. I'm going to use constraint again to add more. This time though, I'm going to use a mate. I'm sorry, instead of using mate, I'm going to use flush. And the idea is I want to flush this surface with this surface. I hit Apply. Again, if I check, this piece can still move. It's not fully constrained. I need one more constraint. constrain. We're going to do a mate with a flush solution. Select this surface and this surface and hit apply. So if I look in the browser now, I have 3 constraints on the blue and the red piece. The blue one no longer moves because it's grounded to the origin, and the red one also is now fully constrained and doesn't move. I'm going to repeat this process for the other pieces as well, so I'll do one more as an example before you guys get a turn to try it out. I'm going to bring the orange piece in, place it on the drawing. I only need 1 copy, so I'll hit OK. Use constrain, and I want to constrain the bottom surface of my orange piece, so I'm using the F4 hotkey to find the bottom. I want that face to be touching the top face of my blue piece here. Apply. I'm going to flush this edge with this edge, apply, and then flush these edges as well. Now, since these pieces share a lot of faces in common, the surfaces I picked aren't necessarily the only way that I could be doing this. I could have used other surfaces to flush this and it would do the same thing. Go ahead and bring in the next piece. I'm going to rotate this piece using the free rotate. Use the constrain command. Place a mate between this surface and this surface. Apply. I'm going to flush these edges. Apply. Flush these edges. Apply. Final piece, my yellow piece. Bring that in. This one I'm actually not going to rotate in position. If you select the proper surfaces for your constraints, it'll rotate it the way it needs to go. So I'm going to have this face mate with the top of the orange here. Hit apply. And although it looks incorrect, as soon as I add a couple more constraints, it's going to work out just fine. So now what I want to do is I want to flush this face with this one. Apply. See how I rotated it? I have one more constraint that I need to add. I'll also do a flush for that one to flush this face to this face and apply. So now all my pieces are fully constrained. None of them will move, which is what we want. And I'm going to save this. This is an assembly file, and I will call this puzzle cube, and we will use this puzzle cube to build our exploded view next.